Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, podcast listeners. We are currently filling our May group class. So if you are interested in learning this work and learning how to see your programs, identify your wounds, your childhood wounds, and heal your shadow self by connecting to your heart, connecting to your divinity, please come join us and learn the power within. Now, we have 5 spots available left for this next group class. So please don't wait. Jump on a call, schedule a free consultation, and I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Morley.
And we are fresh off of solar eclipse week. April 8th is the day that I think that you and I, we saw so many videos on, so many channels, so many people in the spiritual community talking about this day. It was a very big, energetic day. And I think for, you and I had this conversation one night. We're like, all right, what do you think is going to happen? I was like, there's going to be a financial collapse. The world's going to end. Because all these things. And of course it did its thing and nothing major happened. But I think energetically, we definitely shifted. It definitely uprooted deeper and deeper layers to some of our wounds. So I'd love for you to go in because you had a pretty gnarly 2 days of solar eclipse and the day after. So
yeah, it was more the day after. The day of, I was like, oh, it just feels
we were just feeling
tired,
weird, really tired,
a little heavy.
Yeah.
And then the day after, I was so exhausted, and it was finally this, okay, the final crutch that I was holding on to was coffee. And I've been trying to quit coffee and I have many times for the last 4 years, I would say. And I found it harder to fully quit than alcohol. And I think that's because it's more socially acceptable and it doesn't make me completely incoherent. And I've gone through many months and many phases of not drinking coffee. And whenever I did in the past, before I started this work, actually up until probably this last 2024, it would really make me feel terrible. It would make me dissociate, but I still loved the flavor. I tried drinking decaf for a while, just didn't quite do it. Flavor's not as good. And I guess there was something in the caffeine as well that was, hitting those addictive programs that I have in me. And it's been really I go through a level of healing and I'll have a cup and I'm like, oh, I can drink this again. And then the programs that are in there take over. And then instead of it just being like, I can have this occasionally, which allows me to stay in balance because I'm so sensitive. I just go nuts when I'm on coffee. It's like I'm on like a crazy drug. I feel like I'm on Limitless. I've just got all this energy.
It's
Ellie can attest.
Watching you on coffee.
I have all these psychedelic kind of connections and visions, and I feel so connected to me, but I'm blasting off through space just from a cup of coffee. It's pretty wild. And then when I start drinking that every day, that's when the programming starts to come in and the wounds are being activated in some degree. And so it was finally after the eclipse, I was like, okay, it's time. I've really got to focus on finding internal and energetic balance throughout the whole week and not keep repeating these cycles of going in, having a bit, thinking I'm okay, drinking it every day. And then it very quickly leads to me feeling very unbalanced and very tired and just not feeling good within myself. And as I started to work with this and be like, okay, it's time to let this go, I was like, bringing up all of this like really deep pain. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And where I came to when I was working with the energy, what it showed me was this was like the last, it feels like, maybe it's not the last, but it felt like the last piece of attachment to the energetic enmeshment I had with my mum when I was a kid. And it was finally this part of me that is like, Danny, are you fully ready to do this path alone? And it was this final straw that I was just holding on to. Like, I did not want to let go of this one thing. I was not in surrender. I was resisting letting go and actually doing this on my own. And so through making this kind of inner declaration that I have to work on really letting this go and not to fall into duality and go, I'm never doing this again. Because, you know, that's a very childish thing. I still want, if I want to enjoy a cup of coffee every now and again, that's okay. But not falling into the trap of, oh, I'll have it one day and then the next day and then the next day. And then I don't follow it. It like leads to this downward spiral of imbalance within my system. And letting that go, it was all to do with holding on to the need for mum, which is so wild. As I'm moving through the experience and laid on the floor, curled up, crying, which is so funny, like over releasing the idea that I still wanted coffee, I like brought up all of this deep, deep pain.
So I'd love for you to go deeper into this, because I think that a lot of people hear this and they go straight into their minds and they're like, how does logically this happen? Where like you have all this stuff with coffee and you want to give it up and then it goes into a mom wound. And I remember when you were telling me this, it was this beautiful moment for me to go, Ellie, it's always deeper. I think I tend to brush a lot of things off where it's like, oh, it's just this, like, I have a very difficult relationship with food. And like when some food things come up, the programs will be like, oh, it's just because of this and it's just because of that. And then those programs take over. And then I just kind of push everything to the side. And when you were telling me that it opened up into this like huge mom, deeper layers of the wound, I was like, holy shit, like there it is. So I'd love for you to just talk about, what that process looks like for you, for people at home who are like, oh, wait, I do similar things. And is there more underneath this?
Yeah, well, when we talk about any kinds of addictions, there's always deeper stuff going on, for the most part. And this is, now I know, is like, oh, this is the addictive nature I had with alcohol. And I was never like a full blown like alcoholic or anything, like needed to go to rehab. But like most people grow up in the UK, you become very dependent on the substance of alcohol. And so that was kind of like where this energy first came out. And then the more and more I started healing and transforming this energy that needed that thing, the behavior of wanting the thing outside of me to make me feel okay. And this used to show up socially when I was in social situations. For me to be what felt like my most fun, authentic self, I needed a drink of alcohol to relax, to be able to not feel that social anxiety, and take the edge off. And so this is an example of how there's programs and wounding running, and we need something that, and we choose to get it outside of us to make ourselves feel okay. And as I'd healed a lot of the stuff with alcohol, the only thing left was kind of coffee. That was the final crutch. And underneath it all was just this young part of me that never learned to be okay on his own. And the programs that were running was this energetic enmeshment. And I see it come out within me with our animals. And I see the way that, oh, I want them to love me, and I just want to be with them all the time. And what happens is that doesn't allow the animal or the inner child to grow up and mature. And that's basically what it is. And so that part of me is constantly looking for that thing, whatever it is outside of me. And it used to be alcohol. And as I've healed, the energy is just translocated into now, oh, and now it's coffee, because that's not as bad and not as addictive, but the energy is still there. And you'll see this came up. I can't remember who said this the other day, with addicts. and a lot of them become like addicted to marathon running, and it's more accepted because it's health and fitness. And this is the same thing that's happening with me. It's like, well, it starts with coffee, it starts with alcohol, and then now it's, well, coffee, because the energy is still there. The underlying energy that's driving that behavior is still there, and we have to address it. And how do we address it? This is the work that we coach people through, is sit down and start to work through the mental, emotional, behavioral programs, like what programs are coming up. And then when you're open, you start to, connect to your soul and allow your soul to guide you and show you what's going on. And with a lot of this, like, it's the day after the eclipse, I'm like, what am I feeling right now? This is absolutely insane. Just by, like, I'm sat here, I was sat outside with a cup of tea, which I'm drinking right now. Here we go in the morning. I was sat outside with a cup of like peppermint tea. Kind of like, okay, this is what I have to do for a little bit. And I just felt like just terrible, absolutely terrible. It was like my world was ending. And so as I dropped in, and this is the work that we coach people through, I was asking my heart, like, what is this? And then I could just feel like this, I could see this little kid inside of me. I could feel him. It was very faint. It wasn't very strong. And he was just like grasping at things. And I was just allowing him to let that part of me die. And this was another layer of ego death. Wow. I can't remember what your original question was.
You answered it. You answered it in like a million ways.
Okay.
Per usual. So fascinating. And I think for me, and this is something that I'd love to talk about just in real time, I run a lot of programs of not wanting to look at my relationship with food. And I have severe gut issues, and I still won't look at it. And so I'll do all of these external things to help avoid going deeper into what's actually going on. And it doesn't mean that I definitely have dipped my toe into what's going on with my gut. And there's a lot of mom wounds. I think all of it is mother wounds in there. And then I'll dip out, and then I'll just kind of ignore it for a little while. And I'm still running all these programs of like, it's helpless. I've always had like really, really bad stomach issues. My mom would always tell me as a kid, like, you always complain about your stomach when you were, even like when you were 4, like when you were 5. And so clearly it's been with me for a long time. And I had this beautiful healing with Rachel one time. And the trigger was that when I go into yoga class and I see like all the girls and all of their like, the yoga tops and the tight pants and all this stuff. And I looked at me, I'm always wearing something really baggy or frumpy. I definitely have a very poor relationship with my physical body. I have a lot of trauma with just constantly being judged as a child. I think I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but I'm Korean. And if you look at Korean women, mostly very, very petite, very skinny. Everyone that I've always grown up with, very small, very skinny. I made a joke with Danny the other day where we were looking at our foster puppy who's growing. And I'm like, he's so skinny, like his legs are getting so long, he's so skinny. And he's like, and then Danny was like, yeah, when you're growing up, I'm like, no, I never experienced that. Like, I've never been skinny in my life. I always just grew wide. And so it was always like, I've always had fat on me. I've always been like chubby. I've always been like this and that. And so ever since I was a kid, and of course my soul chose to be born into a family, there is definitely like fat phobia in my family. And I think in Korean culture too, there is this thing where we look down upon people who have any kind of meat on them. Like in Korean, like adults, they just say whatever to you. We're a very blunt culture. So like every time I'd show up at family gatherings or hang out with like family friends, they'd be like, oh, Ellie 살쪘다, which is like, you gained weight. And it was like, I'm like 5. You know what I'm saying? So I've always been judged for the way that I look. And I knew really young that the way that my body looked wasn't acceptable. It was bad. It was wrong. So I carry all of this shame on my body. Like no matter how much like I move into cycles of working out or eating right, I can never get rid of like the arm fat and this belly pooch. And I'm like, what is happening? Well, it's energetics. I carry all of this shame. Like I was the kid that was like 7 going to the pool and I had like a long t-shirt on that was extra large. And my mom's not even saying anything to me. Like my mom's not even saying like, Ellie, like there's nothing to hide. It's almost like energetically, she welcomed me to wear the shirt because my body was fat or like I was chubby or I did not look good. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
Fiori's moving me through this healing, and I'm going to this trigger of like, why do I dress so frumpy? Why do I look at my body like I'm 1,000 pounds and I'm so ashamed? And as she's taking me deeper, she connects with my inner child and she's like, feel this. Because I got into this memory where I was in the kitchen one time and like my mom used to buy a lot of junk food and I was like sneaking in like a piece of pound cake, even though I knew that if they saw me eating this piece of pound cake, I would be hearing like, Ellie, you shouldn't eat that. Like, why are you eating that? Like, that's unnecessary. And this memory popped up and she was like, can you feel that you did this out of spite? Because of how much you were getting of like the body shaming and the criticism, all this, you started sneaking in food out of spite. And I was like, whoa. And I could feel I haven't fully accessed the full throttle of that, but I was like, oh, I can feel that a little bit of like, you keep making me feel like I'm shit. You keep making me feel like what I am is disgusting. And so to spite you, I'm just going to keep destroying myself, or I'm going to, keep making myself bigger. And I think that is, now that I'm talking about it, this is the cycle of how I've learned to abuse myself. I have moved through many cycles of hurting myself growing up. And I think this is one of the things that I do. And I think even my relationship with food now is, I know this is going to hurt, but I'm still going to do it because it's a way for me to feel pain. And so, which is just a reflection of how much pain is still inside of me that I carry. And obviously we can go into so many different directions with this, but I'm understanding more and more like, oh, my relationship with food is a way that I abuse myself.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I do the same. I do the same thing. And we've both been working a lot with the food thing, and this thing with coffee is no different. And for me, it was moving out of balance. And Fiore actually gave me a reading one day and said that, my energy centers my energy in my body go like this. And on one side, I've got this like really entitled little brat kid who's like in complete resistance because he's a little brat and he was enmeshed and had permissive parents that told him he could do whatever. And on the other side, he was deeply wounded. And that created within me this resistance of, well, I refuse to do any of these things. And so I was just stuck in these loops of just repeating this abuse to myself of like, whenever I would find balance, I'm just like, okay, well, I want to do what I want to do, or I don't want to stay in balance because that means that I have to feel the deeper pain of what's here. And I don't want to do that because it really hurts. And that's the other side. So I would just swing, and it causes my systems to go into absolute chaos. And yeah, you said something really interesting there about getting rid of things. You were like, when I do
Like
all the
eating right,
things.
or yeah. And it's,
She's still in that energy of, I got to get rid of it.
yeah.
I got to get rid of the fat, rid of the pain.
Yeah. Because I see it as disgusting. So when I look at myself in the mirror or when I feel my body, all that runs is, you're disgusting. Like, you're so gross. I have a very, very messed up relationship with clothes as well. And I think being in the entertainment industry and being on camera for so many years, I struggled so much because I didn't like the way that I looked. The camera always put 10 pounds on me. That's what all the camera does. It puts weight on you. And just like watching myself and seeing how uncomfortable I used to feel, like it was awful. And I think, too, as we're talking about this, I have all of these blocks with working out. So I'm definitely like an active person. Like, we constantly, like me and Danny have hiked San Diego. I've hiked in many states. Like with me and my dog, like hiking is something that I really, really enjoy. I love being active. In my birth chart, I am a lot of fire. And like, as an Aries, I know that like in me is this, like when I watch cycling instructors or like when I watch any instructors and, they're so passionate and they're just like that hype man. They're like, go, 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 go. I see myself in that. And I always think to myself, I have that in me, but she is nowhere to be found. And so I run all of these programs of like, when I go to the gym, it's too hard. I can't do it. And like I went to the gym this morning and I was like, push yourself. And there's this program that goes, Why? It's uncomfortable. And as I'm speaking about this, it's, oh, I still have all of these programs in place and I still don't want to look at them because it's a way for me to stay stagnant. Like, it's still a way for me to be a victim. It's still a way for my inner child to be like, mom is still not loving me and dad is still not seeing me and they're still not accepting me. And so I'm just going to sit here in rebellion and destroy myself until they get to a place where they love me and accept me for who I am. That just hit me. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's blocking me from flourishing, from becoming like a six-packer, like abs, like working out constantly. Because when I work out, at the aftermath is I feel like I can take on the world. When I don't abuse myself with food, I tell you this all the time, but there were these moments in my healing journey in the past few years where so much pain would come up. I would go into like a month of not eating. And I would just drink water and I would just do that, right? And I felt like I could take on the world. Like, I really feel like I'm somebody who doesn't need a lot of food in this life. And yet food is the one tool that I use to abuse myself. And every time food goes into my body, I feel like shit. I feel lethargic. It takes over me. So it even tells me things like, you can't drop in because you feel like shit, and feel all of like the heaviness in your stomach and like, oh, you're such a piece of shit. It's always for me to stay stagnant, to stay trapped, to stay as a victim, to stay just being powerless, instead of find the warrior, connect to your soul, connect to your heart, open, and let's pull through and go through. And all of it is just a one big self-sabotaging program because there's still a little girl in there that just wants mom and dad to just accept and love her for who she is. That was a session. Just did that on my own.
Good job. Nice work.
Really interesting.
How does that feel?
I think it's hard for me to accept because that means that there's a lot of work for me to do and go into, and I can feel the part of me that doesn't want to. So I just got to love that part of me that doesn't want to without forcing her. Because I do bring a lot of force energy to like, let's go, let's do this. What are we doing? And she's like, I'm not, I want,
It's we were talking about this in a group class last night. It's really common that when we aren't super elevated and we haven't been practicing this work for a while, we see something that we want, and then our programs that we've been conditioned to have of this toxic forcing take over and just try and force our way to the more elevated, more healed, more enlightened place. And that never works. You can't force your way up the ladder like that. It doesn't work. It's the opposite. It's coming back within and opening. But when we have those energies of force, when we carry those, like for yourself, Ellie, it was years of rigid parenting, right? Being forced to do certain things. For me, it was what I just learned to do as a child, because I knew the only thing I learned, I didn't have very much guidance from my parents as a child. And so when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, you see, oh, well, no structure doesn't work. So maybe just hyper rigid structure. That's the only thing that's going to get me to where I need to be. So I developed a lot of internal rigidity. And this is how the pendulum swings from side to side. This is the duality. And so for me, it's been all of this force energy comes from a place of powerlessness. And that's my own like creation of, oh, I don't have the power to do this, so I've got to force my way through. And that never gets us truly to, it might work once or twice in a few examples. Like I ran a half marathon one time, and I forced my way to the end and I couldn't walk for a week. Legit, like my body was so torn up. It was because there was so much pain, and I just forced my way through it. And it can get you there, but it's never going to allow you to elevate and truly get to where you want to be.
Beautiful. And, speaking on birthing our own programs, I was at the gym this morning. I was listening to this episode that Fiori gave. It's an incredible episode on the framework to end all suffering. And there was this one part where she talks about how she worked with a client who was a little girl who always felt like mom just hated her. And I think this is something that's so relatable for all of us, especially for those of us who have experienced any kind of abuse, is you don't understand as a child why, and I'll give myself an example, why my mom is so angry at me all the time. You don't understand that as a child, right? And so what happens is, because a child needs their mother, right? And for me, it was like, I'll get whatever I can get. Like, even if you're mean to me, if you still are here at the end of the day, like, I'll accept it, right? And so she was talking about how this client, because she experienced all of this abuse as a child, she learned, well, if mom hates me, then there must be something about me to hate. And then here comes all of the self-hatred programs that were birthed. And I'm like, oh, that's me. Like, I don't like to admit that I hate aspects of myself, but the truth of the matter is that that's definitely there. I definitely hate many aspects of myself, and it's this unwillingness to see it for what it is, because then my inner child has to accept that mom was angry and projected all this stuff onto me, and she doesn't want to accept that. So it's easier for her to internalize it and go, well, it must be me. It must be my fault. There must be no other reason. And this is what's this is so fascinating and hilarious about humanity, is that this is what we do. Instead of seeing it for what it is, mom's running her programs. She's in all of her wounding. Mom hates herself. It needs to come out in a certain way. We go, oh, let me internalize this because I still need any kind of quote unquote love from you, and I'm going to destroy me and hate me. And that's what I've done my entire life.
Yeah.
Myself. Yeah.
And just take you back to that. How old were you in this situation, roughly?
As you said, that 4 came up.
4, great. So take you back to the consciousness of a 4-year-old, or the level of mental and emotional maturity. You know, they're still developing, 4 years old. So of course they're going to take it personally. Yep. It's in that those years of 0 to 7 where the ego is still like, you know, we're in our ego, we're in complete separation, and we're experiencing through this veil of illusion. And so when we go through this experience of, maybe because this is a healing that I've been working through recently, of the hatred that's in there, and our parents were not enlightened. So any tiny little thing, they might have been perfect 99% of the time, but just that one moment where they've had a long day and their kids are being so annoying, because this comes out with our dogs, right? And spend 99% of the time loving them, and then when we're super stressed and we get pissed off and we have an eruption of emotion, that 4-year-old internalize it as, oh, that's my fault.
Yeah.
Like, it must be me. I must be inherently flawed. I must be inherently wrong for her to be responding like that, because she's normally not like that. Like, to be able to move through those first 7 years of your life and not have that happen, it's probably unheard of. Yeah. And then the important part is not being able to, you know, not having that guidance in the moment of being able to open your heart and work through it, if that does happen. Because we're all human. We do have emotions. We, as a kid, we're going to interpret things probably, you know, incorrectly, because we're just a child.
Yeah.
And then it's the case of, well, are you able to process it?
Right. Yeah, I was watching this TikTok video that went viral, and this mother's account is all about parenting and how to parent your children. And one of her videos went viral because she was filming her 2-year-old or 3-year-old, is like, you know, he's in that, I think they call it like the crazy 2s. I don't know. I'm not a parent, but I think when you hit 2 years old, like, things get crazy. And the child was like throwing a tantrum, whatever, and she starts filming herself in front of her child, hysterically crying and being like, you know, you're just hurting me so much, and like, mom can't do all this, and blah blah. And as she's filming herself, she's writing in all the captions like, this is basically helping the child to understand what I'm moving through. And all of the comments were like, my mom did this to me, and what it did to me was that I was responsible for all of her feelings, of all of her emotions, and It fucked me up royally. And I was like, oh, and watching it in real time and getting to see it just as an observer, as a student, I was like, holy shit. And we think that that's love or that's power, and we don't understand how much we are messing that child up by doing what she was doing.
Because mom's making it about her.
Yes.
Yeah. Mom's making their, you know, whatever the child is moving through about themselves, when it's not. And the child needs to understand the opposite, that
right.
mom's going to have emotions, dad's going to have emotions, and like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it might be to do with me, or it might not be anything to do with me. Most of the time, it's probably nothing to do with me. It's not personal. But when we're in our ego, it feels so personal.
Yeah. And the kid's standing there, and you can just look, you can see it in his eyes. He's so confused. He does not compute or understand what is happening. And yet he is receiving all of her programs, all of her wounding, all of this shit. And he is at a ripe age for him to absorb that and then become traumatized as a result of that. And then when she's not off camera, think about what she's doing. And this is not judging her. This is just showing us, like, holy shit, this is what we do.
Yeah, this is what happens.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I see this in myself with our dogs. I'll be fine, and then they'll be going nuts, and I'll hit a moment, and I'll feel emotions come up that it's been activated, and it's nothing to do with them. Yes, they might be triggering it, but it's nothing to do with them. This is the same thing that happens with parents and children. To me, there's no difference between human children and dog children in that matter. Like, they're still going to trigger all the stuff. They're going to bring it all out in this beautiful, beautiful lesson. And then it's up to us, what do we choose to do with that pain? And that's what really sets apart, the people that are coming here to evolve and elevate, is when these triggers happen, when this pain starts to surface, when these emotions from our past show up, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to choose to do the work to sit down and break down, okay, what are my programs? Where did this come from? And can I open my heart and love them so that this behavior doesn't have to be projected onto this innocent little being that's here right now? Because that's not okay.
Yeah. And how much the world will change when we see that they're just here to bring up what needs our love. Yes, are they eating all the grass and eating poop and pulling and driving us nuts? Yeah, but are they just being dogs? Yeah. So why are you getting all crazy and blaming on them? Like, ugh. And then the moment you do it, you just feel all this guilt and shame if you yell at them. And it's like, it's so beautiful for me to see the aspects of me that show up like my parents, and then the aspects of me that are so unloving. And what way do I need to bring in when I'm about to, like, blow my lid, when they're driving me to the wall? And a lot of times it's the way of harmlessness and gentleness. Like, bring that way in so that I can just see it for what it is. Thank them and not hurt. I think I'm also at this place. This is another podcast episode. I'm moving through the program of hate, which is it's deep in me. It's ingrained. And I'm at this shifting turning point where I'm really starting to see and understand, like, I don't want that energy in me at all. And what way to bring that in is the way of harmlessness and gentleness, which is something that I didn't experience a lot growing up. And so it's all beautiful, and it's all just necessary for us to move through. And so to anyone at home, I really hope that this episode lets you go deeper into some of the things that you might not be seeing. I think Danny's story of the coffee is just a reminder. It's like, don't brush away the little things. Don't brush away, like, oh, it's just that, it's just this. It's like, no, there's so much more in there. And like, as you were saying, like last night in class in our Going Beyond program, we had two of the classmates bring up two things where they're like, oh, I just brushed that one off because it was so small. And then when we went into it, it was so big. And it's like,
it's just a little trigger. It's just a little. It's not really. I haven't really got any triggers. It's just a little. Just something little.
Huge. And it was beautiful for them to see it and then move through it. So don't ignore the little triggers. They will sometimes amount to your biggest wounds.
Yeah, the darkest, most painful traumas that we have hidden in there are not going to be lying in the big triggers that are blaring. They might be, but they all, it's more likely they're going to be in the things which are really hiding, the things which our consciousness doesn't want to look at, because the shadow doesn't want to look at itself. So when we can start to do the work with those little parts, the small little triggers that we tend to just justify and brush off, that's when the really deep stuff can come out.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening this far. If this, helped you in any way, please share it with anyone who else is on this path, because that helps us just do this for free. It helps us out. So if if you're not ready to jump into coaching or anything like that, just keep watching the podcast and share it. Throw us a like, subscribe. But if you are feeling the nudge right now, we are always looking for new clients, new students to guide through this work, to do what Ellie and I do every day, understand our programming, understand where our wounds come from. So please feel free to jump on the website, book a consultation, and we can see if we can help you if you're ready for this journey of becoming oneness consciousness. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.